Everyone who's coming on. Welcome to this month's mentor program. We have a special guest today, Art Ferreira. He's with Coeus Global. Oh, I said that wrong.
Coeus Global.
That's what I said. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we're very excited because, all of us who have run a village, we depend on our volunteers. And I can see from those who are on right now, we're at different sections of, I see somebody from Delaware, I see somebody from Village Volunteers. But what I'm going to ask you all to do is put your name, your village name, and where you're located in the chat so that Art can see, how far reaching we are. I do see somebody from California. So if you don't mind doing that, throw it in the chat and just say hi. There you go. St. Louis Obispo, California. So I'm going to turn it over to Art and let him talk about volunteers and, why this is such an important part of, the volunteer network, especially as we look at risk management in our villages and, navigating the complexities of, like Art, for your information, we have villages that don't do any transportation, but then we have villages like my old village that 65% of the service requests were transportation requests. And so volunteers are doing this. And so I'm going to turn it over to you, Art. Feel free to, knock yourself out.
Okay, great. Thank you, Barbara. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for having me today. Just wanted to spend some time today. Spoke with Barbara, and questions relating to background screening services, compliance, and things like that come up quite frequently. We work with a number of other village type organizations that are structured very similar to your network. And we just wanted to give you an overview of some of the key points to consider when considering conducting background checks on not only your employees, but also your volunteer staff and possibly any external contractors or outside consultants, anyone that participates in your program or provides services to your program, you might want to consider. So, I'm sorry, was there a question? I heard a
Think
voice
somebody,
back.
I just put them on mute. They just were
Oh, okay.
talking. Yeah.
I didn't know.
Yeah.
I didn't
Sorry
know if
about
someone.
that. No.
Oh, no problem.
No, and I actually, Art, just put in the chat. We'll have questions at the end. So,
Okay,
okay.
perfect.
If
Perfect.
that's okay with you. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, a couple of things that we want to talk about is, basically what are the reasons for doing background checks? What are some of the things that we want to look out for? So, of course, the first thing we want to always consider is when talking about doing background checks is what is the overall value of conducting background checks for your organization? I personally believe it's the protection of your organization's reputation within the community. So if something happens at one village location, one member of the network, that'll have an effect on the entire network, because if that gets out into the public, if it makes it into the news, the newspaper, it gets picked up, it's shown on social media, all of these type of things, what ends up happening is the people who normally contribute, donate, participate in your organization now start questioning whether it is the right type of organization to be involved with. So, we have some little slides here, don't be dogged by, bad recruitment decisions on your volunteers and staff. The main thing is you see there's different crimes listed on the right there: homicide, theft, sexual assault, arson, domestic violence, child abuse, and illegal weapons. These are the types of criminal records that can be uncovered when doing everything from a very basic criminal check to much more comprehensive and extensive types of background checks. The nice thing about working with a background screening vendor is you get to select what type of package you need on a per candidate level. So if you have, Barbara had mentioned, some of the villages do a lot of transportation, some don't. So the ones that do not do a lot of transportation might only need standard criminal histories just to make sure the person doesn't have any convictions that would disqualify them from participating in your program, while other villages, in addition to the criminal history, they might want to add motor vehicle histories to make sure the person has a clean driving record. Some villages may want to make sure, people aren't using any type of illegal drugs and may want to add drug screening. So there's many variables that can be set to give you just the services you need. And you're not required to have one package for every type of candidate. You can have as many packages as you require. You can have one package simply and run that on all of your candidates, or you can have multiple packages and run them on specific types of candidates for specific purposes. So again, why do we want to conduct background checks? The cost of recruitment, I'm sure you all realize, has gone up significantly, in the past several years. And in addition to that is the cost of training, recruiting, staffing, maintaining all of your candidates and all of your volunteers and employees is an expensive process, not just in terms of dollars, but also in terms of time. Most of the nonprofits we work with, and we work with thousands of nonprofits, across the country. We're the sole national partner of the National Council of Nonprofits out of Washington, D.C., and we work with all of the state nonprofit associations throughout the U.S. And one of the things that we see is most nonprofits have a limited amount of resources to invest into the recruitment, the training, and all of that type of stuff. When you bring in 10 new volunteers, and if 7 of them leave in a fairly short period of time and you're re-recruiting or you're selecting candidates who maybe you wouldn't have selected if you had more information on their background, you might reduce the amount of time you're spending doing that. And of course, that time can then be used in your programs to provide services to those in need. So again, we want to protect the reputation of the organization. We want to reduce any potential negative publicity, that could happen when you hire someone who you shouldn't have hired, who shouldn't have been allowed to participate in your program, hire or bring on as a volunteer. So again, the background check can help weed those type of people out. There's several, functions that having a background screening program in place can do. You protect the rights of your consumers. So the people who are taking advantage of your services have the right to have an expectation that they are being protected, that you are providing them with a safe and secure program to get assistance through. We can work with organizations throughout the country on making sure that your background screening policies are compliant not only with federal law, with the FCRA, but also with any particular state laws. We're located in California, and just as an example, the state of California is what's called a 7-year reporting state. So in many states, when we do a criminal history, we can look as far back as the criminal record goes and report that information to our client. In California, we can only go back 7 years from the final date of disposition of the case in what we report. So, we can make sure that any results reported to you nationwide are not only in compliance with the federal law, but also with your individual state laws. I mentioned giving a safe program for your consumers, for the people who are taking advantage of your program. But by the same token, the people you hire as employees and as volunteers have the right to know they're in a safe environment. They don't want to become a volunteer and be paired up with someone who, might be committing illegal acts or doing things that are inappropriate during their time serving your organization, because if something should happen, they're going to be implicated along with the person who was doing wrong. So again, just keep in mind that, all of this is important to make sure that everybody is safe, people-wise, and that your reputation is safe also in your community. A couple of examples of the type of things to be considering when conducting background checks and why the compliance side of it is so important are various things that we see many nonprofits are not aware of, even if they're already conducting background checks. So the first one on that list, you see adverse action. People think that when they conduct a background check, it comes back with, say, a felony assault conviction, and you make the determination you're not going to allow that person to participate in your program. Many people think they just tell the person, sorry, we're not going to bring you on board, and they're done. Well, under federal law and most state law, there's a process that has to be undertaken called adverse action notification. It's basically a process where when you uncover adverse information in a background check report and you're going to take an adverse action or not allow the person to participate in your program, there's several things you have to do when you notify them. You have to let them know what the nature of the crime was. You have to give them copies of the background check report for their review, and you have to give them information on how to file a dispute with the background screening vendor or the consumer reporting agency, which is what background check companies like mine are considered under federal law. So you have to give them this information. That gives them the opportunity to contact my company, say, hey, I was never convicted of this felony. If they file a dispute, we have to do a complete reinvestigation at no cost to the candidate and no cost to your organization. Once that reinvestigation is completed, then we will report to you and to the candidate our findings of the reinvestigation. If the person was correct and we misreported data, we obviously need to fix that report, notify both parties, and then, of course, you would probably bring the person on board. What happens, in reality, the vast majority of times is we confirm that the person is, in fact, a convicted felon, and you go ahead and tell them that they're not going to be allowed to participate in the organization. And the second half of that adverse action notification is sending them a letter that's called the adverse action letter. So the first letter is a pre-adverse action. That's you telling them they may not be placed in your organization. And the adverse action is you will not be placed in the organization. It's a very simple process to follow out. Our system has all of the appropriate letters that you might require pre-configured within each background check report. There's a simple link you click, and it'll create the letters for you to sign, print out, and forward to your candidate along with a copy of the report, et cetera. So those type of things are part of the whole compliance thing that we want to make sure that people understand and people are familiar with. In our system, the way we conduct our business, we take care of all of that. And anytime there's potential new laws that are implemented either federally or at a state or even at a municipal level, we will notify you of that. If there's any changes that need to be made to your system, your portal within our software, we'll make all of those changes. If there's new forms or documents that you need to be using, we'll make sure your forms and documents are updated. So all of that is a basic part of the service. The next legal thing to be conscious of, that's a big one, is claims of negligent hiring and retention. If you do a poor background check or you do no background check at all, you open yourself up to potential liabilities of you should have known better type of position, that many judges take. You should have known better. You should have been conducting background checks, or you should have known better. You should have been conducting a more comprehensive background check than you were. Because if you bring someone on and it's later found out that it was someone who probably shouldn't have been allowed to participate in your programs, that, as I mentioned, opens up liabilities for you. So, we just want to make sure that we're minimizing the potential for a negligent hire or retaining someone who is negligently hired. And the last one I'll just touch on briefly is the ban the box. You've probably heard a lot about ban the box over the last few years. And basically it comes down to what it typically means is in the past, when you were evaluating candidates, you could ask them upfront on a job application in a separate correspondence after they filled out their job application, have you ever been convicted of a crime, or have you ever been convicted of a felony? Ban the box laws across the country that are, becoming more and more widespread are prohibiting that practice. So basically, your recruitment and your evaluation of candidates goes now from accepting an application or a resume, having to have a first interview with them to kind of see if they have the basic skills that will be required to be considered for the position. And then you can get involved in starting to look at, more, other things, the background history of the person being one. Typically, more and more laws are being passed where you really can't or shouldn't conduct the background check until a conditional offer of being a volunteer or being an employee is completed. But again, that varies. And again, we can help, regardless of what state you're in, with understanding what your, legal requirements are when conducting background checks. Some of the advantages of taking part in our program or having a strong background screening vendor available. It's not just for volunteers. It's for anyone that you want to conduct a background check on, whether they're employees, contractors, consultants, or volunteers. You can provide other services other than just criminal background screening. If you need drug screening, that is available nationwide. And if you have any programs like AmeriCorps or things like that, where people might be going overseas and need certain inoculations or physical exams or anything like that prior to starting their service, you can use us for occupational health services nationwide that we can provide you with. We use an invitation system to really simplify getting background checks ordered. You basically only need to collect the person's name and email address, and you can then go in the system and initiate an invitation to that person. So you would select your package that you want to conduct on them, you would put in their basic information, and you would then send the invitation. Your candidate will receive an email, and that email will explain that they are required to complete a background check for your organization or your village. And they will click on the link in that email, enter all of the required information, reduces your ability to need your requirement to collect information. And of course, there's no possibility that you're going to inadvertently misenter information into the portal, because they will be entering it themselves. And then once they enter their information, they're presented with the required release form. It's called a disclosure and authorization. It's the document you're required to have them sign whenever you conduct a background check on them through a consumer reporting agency like my company. They will read and review that document, and then they will give a physical signature. We've all gone to places and their authorizations consist of click here if you agree, click here if you agree. We don't do that. We take an actual physical signature. If they're using a cell phone or a tablet with touchscreen capability, they sign their name using their finger or a pen stylus. If they're using a regular desktop or laptop computer with no touch capability, they would simply use their computer mouse to sign their name in the given box. And once they submit their order, there will be a physically signed copy of that required disclosure and authorization form connected to their background check report in your portal. So you don't have to keep paper copies of these things laying around or on file anywhere. You can print them out and put them in a file cabinet if you prefer. Most of our clients prefer to keep it securely in our electronic system. So again, they don't have to worry about anyone who shouldn't be seeing any of that personally identifiable information gaining access to any of the paperwork, the background check reports, etc. So once they do that, you're notified via email that they have submitted their background check request. Once the background check request is completed, you'll receive a second notification letting you know that the results are ready to be reviewed in your system. And you simply log in, click on the person's name, you'll see the complete results of their background check, and you'll have access to any documents that were uploaded or signed pertaining to their authorization for the background check. So we also have a process that has become very popular with particularly with nonprofit organizations, and that's our volunteer donation option. Typically, there's two ways to pay for background checks. You can have your organization invoiced on a monthly basis and you pay for all background checks. Or you could say, I want all of my volunteers to pay for their own background check, and they would have to have a credit card to pay for their own background check. Well, we saw that many organizations say, I can't force my people to pay for their background check. They're giving of their time, they're giving of their experience. I don't feel right forcing them to pay for the background check. So we were the first in the country to have this volunteer donation type of option where when you send your invitation, you would be basically sending them an offer that says, if you would like to help us dedicate more of our limited funds to supporting our mission, please consider self-paying for your volunteer background check. By doing so, you'll help ensure that additional services are available, and you thank them for their consideration of the offer. And instead of one link being in the email to start their background check, there's simply two links. One says I will self-pay for my background check, and one says I will have the village pay for my background check. If they click the self-pay, they're taken to the same portal, but this time they put their information in and then they put their credit or debit card information in. If they're selecting to have the organization pay for the background check, no credit card information is ever obtained, and you would be invoiced for those background checks on a monthly basis that the candidates did not pay for. What we found nationwide is about 20% of all volunteers who are given that offer will willingly pay for their background check. So in addition to the savings we have built into our system because you're a nonprofit organization, which average about 40 to 60% off of typical commercial background screening rates, you could save another 20% or more by using the volunteer donation option because you're not forcing anyone to pay for their own background check. You're just asking them if they would be willing to. We also offer a couple of things as part of just to our nonprofit clients, and that is no cost risk management services and no cost compliance consulting. We typically, for our commercial clients, we charge for consulting services, but for nonprofit organizations, we don't. So people think, well, if I'm doing background checks through you, we have risk management covered. You've probably all done some reading or sat in on webinars or conferences where risk management is really bigger than just background screening. So you have things like, how do you go about recruiting volunteers and employees? Once you recruit them, how do you train them? Once they're trained, how do you determine where they would be suitable to be participating in your organization? Once you figure that out, how do you supervise them? So there's a lot of things that go into putting together a risk management program to make sure that all of your efforts are geared towards getting the right candidate. And a background check alone isn't really the best way to go about that, or doesn't comply with best practice guidelines. So again, we can help you with that. Anytime you have any questions, you want to go over anything relating to risk management, you just need to, contact us, and we'll schedule a time to have a chat or some type of, video interaction, whatever is required. And then the same thing with compliance consulting. Again, I mentioned that earlier, that will make sure that any background checks you order and any data that is reported to you for use in your onboarding system will be fully compliant with federal, state, and local laws, if any exist within your area of providing services. We have no monthly minimum fees. If you've ever spoken with other background check companies, I am pretty confident that you would have heard, well, how many background checks do you do a month? Or how many background checks do you do a year? They do that because they price on a sliding scale. the bigger you are, the more background checks you do, the lower your prices. If you're a small organization, which most nonprofits are and most villages are, you would pay a higher price through most national vendors. We always thought that was particularly backwards because it's the small organizations who don't have the money. The big giant organizations and big giant companies, they have all kinds of money to pay for background checks and to have lawyers and have HR personnel and all of these type of things. So we understand that if you're going to do this and you're going to do it successfully and you're going to do it thoroughly, we have to make sure that your costs are as low as they can possibly be and that you are getting the support and the compliance side that you need to do it effectively. So we look at the nonprofit sector as one giant client nationwide. So every client, whether they do one background check a year or they do 500, 1,000 background checks a month, pay the volume pricing discount. And that's why we can say all background checks we sell are 40 to 60% off the normal retail in our industry. And we provide that pricing and those services without any additional costs other than what that particular background check would cost based on your needs. And again, there's no startup fees to participate in our system. When you sign up for our service, we create a custom branded portal for you to log into, to monitor your background checks, to send your invitations, to store your electronic documents. All of those type of things are part of the process. And again, it doesn't cost anything to get that set up. Quite often organizations will say, hey, we've changed our logo, we've changed the name of our village. If you need those type of changes, we do those. There's never any cost for those type of updates once you participate in our system. And probably the most important ones are no monthly minimum fees. So whether you do 50 background checks in July or you do no background checks in July, you're not going to be charged anything because you didn't conduct background checks or you didn't reach a certain number of background checks like most of our vendors or our competitors do. The reason we do this is prior to starting this background screening company, I had been a state level nonprofit president for almost 20 years back in Rhode Island. And in my personal life, I have a developmentally disabled daughter. And through working with organizations that have provided her and us, tremendously beneficial services, once I started the company, I said, I can't give background checks away because then I wouldn't have a company, but I can do everything I can to make it and put our focus on nonprofit organizations so that they have a resource that's more than just, well, you're small, we're going to charge you a lot, and we're not going to give you half of the benefits of the big giant companies. That's how the industry normally works. And as you can imagine, we're not overly popular with a lot of our competitors in the background screening industry, but it is what it is. And we've been in business going on 17 years now. And every year we have grown from year one, even through the COVID years and, economic downturns, et cetera. So we're doing something right. We want to simplify the process. And again, we're fully FCRA compliant. If you're not familiar with what FCRA stands for, it's called the Fair Credit Reporting Act. And everybody mistakenly thinks, well, we're not doing credit reports normally as part of our background check, so that doesn't apply to us. That is 100% false. It absolutely applies to every one of you because the FCRA is what governs the use of consumer data or background screening data for employment purposes. And in fact, in the FCRA, the word volunteer is never mentioned once, but the Federal Trade Commission, who authors the Fair Credit Reporting Act and manages it, has basically said that the term employee, as it is used in the FCRA text, is the same as the word volunteer, and volunteers should be treated exactly as employees when considering background checks and how you're bringing them on board, because in their estimation, a volunteer is the exact same thing as an employee, except they do not get paid. They are recruited, they are trained, they have a schedule. They might volunteer only Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 10 to 3 or whatever the case may be. So their day-to-day dealings with an organization are the same as the day-to-day dealings of an employee. So therefore, the FCRA is something you need to, be familiar with and make sure we're being fully compliant with it. I mentioned lowest pricing in the US of any national vendors. Feel free to put me to the test on that one and contact several background screening firms, and then check with us. And as long as we're comparing apples to apples, I'm pretty confident we're going to be significantly lower priced than our competitors. I mentioned earlier, the easy online ordering for your candidates. If you choose not to do invitations and you wanted to collect all of the information and type it all into the system yourself, what we call a manual order, you can certainly do that. But the tools are there to take away the vast majority of responsibility you would have in getting these background checks sent out, ordered, completed, and then all you need to do is review the results. Mention the protection of the community, the actual people who are working your program as volunteers and employees, the protection of the people you're serving, and of course, the most important one for most nonprofit organizations ultimately is protecting your organization's reputation. In today's world, everything is basically in the cloud and online, and we have the highest levels of data security of any national vendor. And if you ever need any of the reports or information on the certifications and everything that our network-based infrastructure is built on, just let us know and we can make that available to you. So that's it. We want to make sure all of everyone, no matter how they're involved or participate or receive services from your organization, that they are safe from predators. This is just a list of the types of services, some, the vast majority, most commonly requested services we offer. If there's any other search type that you ever would require, almost guaranteed that we can obtain it and get you that data. You just need to, let us know, and we will find the appropriate resource for that data. When a lot of organizations think of criminal background checks, they think a background check is a background check is a background check. I just want to point out that there's many ways to structure background checks. There are things you've probably heard about, criminal databases. You've probably heard about criminal statewide databases. You've probably heard about hands-on county criminal searches. Those are all different components that can be used to uncover potential criminal histories on people. Most background checks will incorporate some type of database service to throw a wide net out there across the country to see if the person has any felony convictions and some misdemeanor convictions, because mostly felonies are reported in national databases. Not too many misdemeanors are reported in the national databases. So if you're running a national criminal database only, you're missing out on a lot of information that you might be able to uncover about an individual. From there are things called statewide criminal histories. In many states, those are highly comprehensive and they cover all the counties and all levels of crimes within that state. So they will give you all of the felonies, all of the misdemeanors, and all of the pending charges that a person might have. National databases won't give you much on the county level, and they won't give you, on the misdemeanor level, and they won't give you any possible pending charges on the person. And then, of course, county criminal searches are where we use our network of over 3,200 court researchers, and they go into basically every county courthouse in the United States on a daily basis. So when we uncover a potential criminal history running one of those database searches, We then send a researcher into that jurisdiction to pull and look at the official court record to make sure that that information is accurate. Because with a database, you have to understand not all information in the database is always 100% up to date. Most database searches are not real time searches. So a person could have a felony conviction show up in a national criminal database. And when you disqualify them, they file a dispute and say to you, I'm not a convicted felon because I had that record expunged. You can't hold that against me legally anymore. And sure enough, when we go and send someone into the court system and look at the official court record, they come back to us and say, yeah, this person had this record expunged, so it's no longer reportable. In many background screening scenarios where you're using other vendors, that's what happens. You run it, they report a crime, you disqualify the person files a dispute, then they go and check to make sure that that information is accurate. We will not report that criminal conviction to you until we have confirmed whether it is still accurate or not. Because under that Fair Credit Reporting Act, it says you have to be using the latest, most up-to-date information available before you take an adverse action against any candidate. So by always verifying at the county court level and then reporting to you, we're always giving you the latest, most up-to-date information available, which tremendously reduces the potential of you having any liability for disqualifying someone erroneously or anything like that. So again, that's criminal types of searches. There's different types. We do things like motor vehicle searches. If you have people who, require certain types of professional licenses, if you use any, healthcare volunteers who have licenses, we can do professional license verifications. We can do terrorist watch list. We can check their previous employment for you. We can check their references, both business and or personal references for you. We can do international background screening. So if you have candidates who had spent time living or came here from a foreign country, we can do background checks in those foreign countries. And of course, if there's ever a big, drawn out type of dispute or something, we can actually get copies of the full paper court record and, make that available, should you need it. Mentioned the occupational health services, things like, employment-based physicals, drug screening, inoculations, and we, all drug tests that we provide have medical review officer services included in the base price of the drug screen. And like I said, if any other searches come up that you might need, just let us know and we can, give you information on the availability of that particular type of thing. With the international screening, if you ever do any international, the pricing can vary wildly for an international search. So in many cases, they're priced similar to domestic background checks, but in other cases, they are, hundreds and hundreds of dollars to get basic criminal information out of certain foreign countries. So again, they're always on a case-by-case basis. If you need a particular country, let us know. We'll get you a quote on what that particular location would cost. So again, just, quickly to wrap up here, why choose Coeus Global? Or really, if you're evaluating other background screening companies, these are the type of things you want to look for that they have. Our volunteer management system is unique in the industry. Some of the features we have are proprietary and our competitors have yet to, implement similar types of features. As I said, things like not all the background screening vendors out there use actual physical signatures. Many of them don't have any type of donation option. They just have an applicant pay option. We mentioned that signed electronic release form that would be attached to the background check in the system on that person. That process you can also use to upload any type of documents related to that candidate that you would like to store electronically. So you could upload a copy of their application, a copy of their resume. If you wanted colored digital photos of each of your volunteers connected, in the system, so that in the future, when you're putting on a program, if you ever need to make sure that the person who says they're your volunteer Sally Jones is actually Sally Jones, you could have a tablet and look at their color picture, in the system. So all of that ability, you can either scan and upload any type of document you want related to that candidate, or we actually have a proprietary fax number. You could fax in either through an electronic fax on your computer or through an old-fashioned fax machine. You can fax in the documents and they'll be stored in the document portal, your document portal. They're not mixed with any other client forms or anything like that. It's always kept completely separate. There's no cost for adding documents to the document portal to be able to store related documents. That's included in the cost of the background check that you would pay for. So there's never any additional fees for us handling your documents or anything like that. We can, well, one I want to talk on is that unparalleled accuracy in the middle of the page there. I mentioned about, misreporting, and a person has the right to file a dispute. In the 16 years we've been in business, we have never overturned reported information that we have submitted to one of our clients because of a candidate dispute, which effectively means we've had 100% accuracy in every background check we've ever conducted over the last 16 years. I'm knocking on my wooden desk that, that continues. We talked about the risk management. We talked about the electronic signature release form, the document management system I just went over. And of course, we talked about the integrated pre-adverse and adverse action letters that are available in the portal. So with that said, that's pretty much the highlights of the things I wanted to go over. I would encourage anyone that would like to learn a little more about us, wants to compare us with their current or potential vendors they're looking at, or just needs some information or has some questions. The best way to go about that would be to go to coeusglobal.com/contact_us and request a call. You can request a call and somebody will get back to you quickly, or you can send an email to info@coeusglobal.com and we will respond to your info request. Most likely we will call you. If it's a simple answer, we can respond back to you via the email. If it's more complex thing that we feel we need to speak with you about, we would certainly send you back a request to schedule a time to have a call with you. And there's our phone number on the screen, and my direct extension is 302. If for any reason you ever wanted to talk with me specifically, as opposed to, just someone. One thing I'll also mention is when you call us, you're not going to get a big sales pitch. In the 16 years we've been in business, we have never had a salesperson. We've never hired a salesperson. We've never cold called any company or volunteer organization. What we do is we form partnerships with national organizations. As I mentioned, the National Council of Nonprofits. We work, obviously very large in the nonprofit sector. We work with major networks within youth sports organizations, which is just another type of nonprofit organization, just operates a little differently. And we do a lot of work for colleges and universities with clinical placement programs. So if they're going into nursing programs, respiratory therapy programs, they're required to have background checks before they start their clinical rotations. We work with networks of colleges and universities to provide those services. So again, you're not going to, as much as this was salesy, this is the only sales pitch you're ever going to get from us. If you contact us, the person that you speak with about your needs, that's all they're going to be concerned about. And that's all they're going to ask you about. And they're not going to ask you how many background checks you do. And they're not going to try to figure out a way to get you to buy more than you need. They will even, in fact, if they think you're going a little overboard with what you think you need in your packages, they'll kind of, try to help you pump the brakes a little bit to make sure that you're purchasing what you need and that you're getting the type of background checks per candidate that are required. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to Barbara to see if there's any questions.
Oh, like I have like several, but I'm going to let other people jump in first. Does anybody have any questions? You can unmute and I'll try to find you on the
Hi,
screen.
it's Teresa Gilbreth. I had 3 questions. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Yep. Go ahead, Teresa.
So the first one was, how often does your firm recommend redoing background checks?
Okay. Typically, I'll be honest, the vast majority of nonprofits nationwide do a background check when the person is brought on board and they never do another one. So it's a struggle for us. We broach the subject of doing follow-up background checks or any type of monitoring after the initial background check. But when we do see people wanting to implement something to do more than the initial background check, it comes in 2 basic styles. One will be a periodic reconducting of the background check. That might be annually, that might be once every 6 months. Annually is far more common, that they'll redo the background check once a year. Or we do have products that are called monthly monitoring services that will monitor the person for a 12-month period. So you don't really need to run an entire another background check, because every month you're getting some of those. I talked about the database searches to see if anything new has popped up on the person. But I would say the vast majority of organizations don't do follow-up. The ones that do, it's typically annually. And then there's, an even smaller percentage of organizations that'll do the monthly monitoring.
Got it. Thank you. My second question is, how long does a background check typically take?
Typically, all background, and again, it depends if you're doing a very basic database-based background check. In many cases, those will come back the same day. The results will come back. If you're doing a little more extensive, where you're incorporating statewide criminal histories or county criminal histories or motor vehicle records, those typically all background checks are completed within 3 to 5 business days. Occasionally, a very small percentage of checks will go beyond, that 3 to 5 business days, but we will, work with our client to explain to them why that's going on. It typically involves potential criminal records came back. Not everything is matching up in terms of the key identifiers, so we're not 100% certain it's your candidate. So we're going back to the researchers in the field to pull additional information so that we can check more key identifiers, because we always want to make sure, especially if it's a common name like Mary Smith, many times you get false reporting. And again, some of our competitors will just report that to you. We will make sure we rule it either is absolutely your candidate or it's someone that closely aligns with your candidate. They have the same name, they might live in the same state, they might have even been born in the same month and year, but we'll weed that all out, and that can take a couple of days more than the 3 to 5 business days.
Great. And then my last question for the moment is, if in our population, both members and volunteers, village-wise, we have a number of people that are really just not in the digital world. They don't use a computer. How would that work?
Yeah, basically in that scenario, you would when we set up a new account, we set it up for this invitation process so that everything is electronic and easy. If you know that that's your case, all you would have to request is say, we're going to have to do some percentage, a fair number of background checks are going to have to be manual. I'm going to have to give the person a piece of paper that they're going to fill out with all of the information. They're going to have to return it to you. You're going to have to sit down at the computer and type all of their information in. You can do that very easily in our system. You can do manual orders. The only thing we would need to know is that you want to do manual orders like that so that we could provide you with a printable copy of that disclosure and authorization form. That's a little more extensive than the electronic one because it will have all of the fields for them to put, you know, name, address, previous address, driver's license number if you're doing motor vehicle reports, social security number, date of birth. When we send an invitation, we don't need to have all of those fields on that electronic release form because they're entering that information into the portal. So again, it's no problem either way. You can do them manually. And if you have people that have never touched a computer, you can still get their background check ordered and processed.
Great. Thank you.
Anybody else have questions? Come on, don't be shy. Well, I have a couple. So on the same line, when I ran a village, we had to do two different portals. And so what I'm hearing from you, Art, is one was just a regular criminal background check, but if they were driving, they had to do a different DMV background check. The big thing for me, and I think Teresa touched on it a little bit too, was that, I didn't want to have the personal information in my office. I didn't want to store their social security number, their date of birth, their driver's license number. That all went into the portal. And that's the case with this, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
And you don't have to use two separate portals. If the motor vehicle is ordered individually, or if it's part of a background check package that is created for that particular village, all of those results are contained in one background check report. You don't have to print it out to view it. You'll actually see it in what we call the HTML view. It'll list all searches that were run as part of that package. Down under that, it'll have a section for documents where that signed release form can be accessed if you need to. And then under that, each individual search type will have its results presented. So again, if it's a motor vehicle record and they had speeding tickets and all of this kind of stuff, they would be listed there item by item. If it's a criminal history and they had one or more convictions, they'll be listed separately as, separate convictions so that you can clearly see this person had 3 felony convictions, one for assault, one for theft, and one for a weapons charge, let's say. They'll all be broken out. And within our system, once you make a determination on a person, you also have the ability to put a designation as to what action you took for that particular candidate. That becomes important so that when you first log into the system, the thing you typically see is the list of all of your candidates. In that list, when we complete a background check, it'll just say complete in the status column. When you review that background check, you can say, the person was disqualified. You can say the person was approved for program A, was approved for program B. And then in the future, you can sort by all of those different columns. So you can get all of your program A people together, all of your program B people together, and things like invoicing. I didn't mention that, but we invoice on a monthly basis. So you just run whatever background checks you're going to run. If you ran none, you're not going to get an invoice, obviously, that month. If you conducted background checks, the invoice will show you what candidates you're paying for, what candidates might have willingly paid for their own background checks, and it'll show you just the balance you owe us and things like that. So yeah, it's all in one system, one portal. The candidate only has to fill in their information one time. They don't have to go to two separate places. And you, as the administrator reviewing and handling the system, only have one login to do everything.
I like that. I also love, and I wish as an ED, I had the ability to offer my volunteers the ability to pay for their own background check, because a lot of them would have done that. And I like that feature a lot. Before I ask another question, anybody else have any questions? Anybody? No. The next question I have, and I found this when I was doing, like, let's just say a regular background check, and somebody had lived in Virginia for a certain number of years, but they were living prior to that in a different state. And I found that some states are a little higher than others. Not to single out New York, but New York was blatantly one of the that I was in sticker shock.
Right, right.
Just a regular background check. If somebody lived in a previous, so I don't know if you want to address that, but that it does vary state to state, and I came across that myself.
Sure. So when we say things vary from state to state, a little explanation is in order about how that occurs. When you create a background check package, so if you tell me I want to do, a national criminal history, a statewide criminal history, and a motor vehicle record, and I tell you, okay, that package is going to be $23.95 for that type of package. The package price never changes. The services the $23.95 for that package is what it costs us to send that information out, to have people in the field retrieving that information, to have the servers and the computer system and the programmers, to run our business. We have a profit margin factored into there that allows us to survive. The part that changes for you is state fees. State and or county fees. So you mentioned New York, and I love to call out New York because it's $95 for a state fee. To make things worse, some vendors are going to tell you it's $97 or it's $98 or it's $100 because they treat a state fee like a search, and they think they should make some profit on that. We only and always only charge what the state charges us. It's a pass-through fee. We're not charging, that's not us charging you $95. That's the state of New York charging $95 for that. And of course, then there's other states like, for example, Oregon has no state fee. So you buy a background check in Oregon, it's, $23.95. You buy that same exact background check in New York, it's $95 more. So that is something to be concerned about. And when talking about other states that might be uncovered, all clients have the ability to determine how they want us to process information that we find about where the person has resided in the past. So you'll hear terms when you're talking with background screening firms about like all names, all counties. What that really means is I want you to do a background check, and I want to cover anywhere that they've lived, and I want to cover any name they've lived under. That's particularly common with, women who've been married one or more times because they have maiden names and married names. So if Mary Smith married Mr. Jones and we run a background check on Mary Smith, if she committed any crimes under Mary Jones since she's been married, we're not going to uncover those. In the past, years ago, when I started in this industry, we would uncover a lot of things, even if we only searched on one name. But as you've probably been aware of, all across the country, these states and these counties are redacting the use of the Social Security number when conducting a background check. So in the past, the Social Security number operated very much like a fingerprint. If a person's your Social Security number doesn't change when you get married. So if we could search a criminal courthouse by Social Security number, we would get everything regardless of what name you lived under. Now that they're redacting that in the vast majority of courthouses, we have to search the names individually. And of course, that can add cost to the background check. So again, as part of the initial discussions we have with each individual village, we would go over with them how extensive do they need this background check to be? Do they need all names? Do they need all jurisdictions the person lived in? Sometimes it'll be a combination where we will do a statewide in the state they've lived in the longest or the state they currently live in, because that's going to cover all counties anyways. The one good thing about New York with $95 is you're getting every county in the state of New York's criminal history in that one search. Not all states, like California, does not offer a statewide. So in California, we have to do individual county searches. So we have to look at your social security trace in the address locator, and we got to say, okay, this person's lived in Boston, Massachusetts, and Memphis, Tennessee, and Los Angeles, California, and then we have to individually run those jurisdictions. So those background checks, can be tricky, and depending upon if you're not careful, they can cost way more than they should. So while there's nothing that can be done about fees, what I will say is for the vast majority of people, the fees are not excessive in most states for conducting county or statewide histories. They're fairly reasonable. And for people in New York, all I can suggest is that they, bring this up with their state legislature, because we have been trying for years and years and years to, they keep pushing these laws. They make it where you have to do more and more and more to protect children, the elderly, the handicapped, whatever. But then they have the nerve to charge you $95 on the back end. We know why they do it. New York has one of the largest budget deficits of any state. And, they do millions upon millions of New York statewide criminal histories through their system, through the Office of Court Administration. So that's a giant revenue stream, because literally they're selling, think about it, air. There's no physical product that they give you. It's data that streams down a cable and comes into our system, and then it can get put into a paper report, into a report you could print out. But that's just giant profit for them. And if they truly were concerned about helping nonprofits and having you folks be able to provide more services and retain more of the donations you accept to help others, they would drastically reduce that, if not make it free. But that, I'll get off my soapbox about New York State.
I know we're at the top of the hour anyway. Art, so thank you so much. Do you mind sharing your slides with me? I'd appreciate it.
Oh, yeah.
We've had several people ask, just send them to me. And thank you so much. It's been a wealth of information.
Oh, thank you. It's always a pleasure. We will share this
video with the rest of the villages.
Great. Always a pleasure. And if anyone has any questions, just reach out to us, and we'll get back to you as quickly as possible. And like I said, no one's going to receive any sales calls from us, because we don't have any salespeople. So when they see this video and you talk to them, or if we put something in a newsletter, that's kind of the biggest
well,
sales
definitely
push.
This will be in the newsletter. So thank you. This is great.
Okay. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Anytime. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.